recorded now. So thank you for joining us today for this discussion. We're going to be talking about tribal children's advocacy centers and really supporting American Indian and Alaska Native children and families within that CAC model. A few housekeeping items before we get going today is just to remember to remain muted while the panelists are speaking. And then if you have questions for the panelists, go ahead and use that chat box. It looks like a little talking bubble there on the bottom panel of your Zoom screen. So go ahead and use that chat feature to communicate any of your questions to the panelists. We are also going to have time at the end for panelists to respond to live questions and answers from the audience as well. So as most of you know, I'm sure by this time, the mute and video buttons are at the bottom left-hand corner of your Zoom application. And when those buttons have red lines through them, you're muted and your video is off. If you'd like us to hear you, you just go ahead and click that microphone button. That's going to unmute you and allow us to hear you. And if you'd like to share your video with us so we can see your face, click that camera button and your video will go ahead and appear as well. So today we're going to have the panelists and moderators spotlighted for you. So each panelist should appear on your screen so you're able to see them while they're sharing. If you're having tech-related issues, please go ahead and use that chat feature as well to communicate what's going on, and someone from our team will help you out on that tech side of things. And finally, again, this Zoom session is being recorded, and we're going to make it available on the Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center website after it's recorded, and that is at nativecac.org. So we'll give people just a couple more minutes here to trickle in. We'll go ahead and get going. So as I said before, welcome and thank you for being here with us today. Today's event is hosted by the Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center, and we're a training and technical assistance center funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And this is part of the American Indian and Alaska Native Children's Advocacy Expansion Initiative. As part of this project, there are grantees from across the country who have been funded to build or to enhance their tribal child advocacy center, or to improve the services that they're providing to American Indian and Alaska Native children who are victims of abuse. We wanted to say a special thank you to our grantees from across Indian country who are here with us today. We saw several of you on the registration list and in the participant list, so thank you for being here. And it's also through this initiative that we're able to offer resources like this, and this webinar being one of them. So we're here to support tribes who are considering implementing a children's advocacy model within their communities. And of course, could not do this work without our many partners, and we wanted to honor them here this morning. So thank you to the National Children's Alliance, the Alaska Children's Alliance, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So my name is Laura Gay, and I'm a training and technical assistance manager for the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and I support the work of the Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center. I'd also like to acknowledge our center's director, Dr. Megan Rides at the Door, who's in the audience today, and myself and colleague Kimmy Wynn Hummingbird, who should appear pretty large on your screen, will be your hosts for today. And in our role is just really kind of facilitating the discussion with our panelists. So Kimmy, I'll turn it over to you for a second. If you would take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yes, Jay, Stongo, Kimmy Wind Hummingbird, Jahajatgados. Good morning, and my name is Kimmy Wind Hummingbird, and I'm joining you today from my reservation in Oklahoma. I'm Muskogee, and prior to joining the NNCTC team about 8 months ago, I worked in Indian child welfare for 22 years. So this is all I know, is preserving families and keeping them connected to their culture and traditions. So I'm happy to be here today and be a part of this panel with you. It's nice to see you all.
Thanks, Kimmy. So as we go through this presentation today, our time together today, we're going to cover a range of topics, and we're going to hear a bit from each panelist as they talk about their CAC, the partnerships that they've forged over the years to provide the services that they do, and the challenges they've faced, and different strategies they've used to overcome those challenges. We also know we have a range of participants who are attending today. So we see many of our current grantees actively engaged in building or enhancing their CAC. And we notice that many of you are coming from already accredited CACs from across the country. And we imagine that some of you are here today in the very beginning stages of determining whether or not or how that CAC model might fit within your tribal community. So we thank all of you for being in the audience here today, for your interest in this important conversation and the work that you're doing throughout Indian country to really support the well-being and healing of Indigenous children and their families. So we hope everybody finds something that they're looking for in today's conversation. That being said, today would not be possible without our gracious panelists who are here today and on your screen for you all to see. Our first panelist is Jade Corella, and she is the director of the Tulalip Tribes Children's Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing. Those are both advocacy centers that serve victims of crime on the Tulalip Indian Reservation, which is in the state of Washington. Jade has her master's in social work and has been providing service in the field of social work for 16 years. Her role includes giving mandated reporter trainings to the Tulalip community employees. She acts as a liaison for departments within the tribal community, and she facilitates the multidisciplinary team, which is a tribal-led team that addresses child abuse cases and also intimate partner violence cases. Her multidisciplinary team includes reps from tribal and federal law enforcement, tribal and federal prosecutors, advocates, and social workers. She's a Tulalip tribal member who has lived on the reservation most of her life and is really drawn to this work because of her longstanding dedication to protecting survivors and victims of abuse in her community. And really believes strongly that maintaining that tribal-based program for crime victims is the essential piece to creating a safer community. So Jade, thank you for being here today. And then we have Megan Sherman here today, and she is the manager of South Central Foundation Unit at Alaska Cares, and CARES stands for Child Abuse Response and Evaluation Services. And that's a CAC located in Anchorage, Alaska. She supervises a team of advocates and forensic interviewers. And the South Central Foundation Advocacy team really provides services to Alaska Native and American Indian families who are evaluated through Alaska Cares. Megan loves to spend time with her family. She enjoys beading and skin sewing and getting outside to enjoy Alaska's beautiful summer weather. And we were just talking this morning that it is that Alaska winter weather today. So Megan, we really appreciate your time and contribution to the conversation. Carol Comanero is here with us today as well. She is Danae. She is the director of the Family Advocacy Center of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community in Arizona. And prior to serving in her current role, she's also worked as for the tribe as a trauma therapist for both children and families, and as a program manager for child and family services there. So Carol, we really value your contribution to the work over the years, and thank you for everything you're bringing today to the dialogue. And then finally, we have Bobby Outen, who is the director of South Central Foundation's Family Wellness Warriors. Bobby's Anishinaabe from the White Earth Reservation, and she grew up in Haines, Alaska. So raised in rural Alaska, Bobby really has a passion for contributing to the physical, mental, and spiritual wellness of the Alaska Native people. She's a healthcare professional and trainer for more than 20 plus years. She has a dual master's in the helping profession. She really offers this unique combination of clinical experience, leadership, instructional and public speaking, and Alaska Native healthcare expertise. So Bobby, we really can't thank you enough for being here today and sharing your stories with us. And so just a reminder for everyone, if you have questions as they come up during the conversation, go ahead and use that chat feature to ask those, and we'll do our best to pull them in the moment. If we don't get to them, we will revisit them, and any new questions that you all have towards the end of the presentation, we'll have a good chunk of time for questions and answers. Okay, so with that, I think we can go ahead and begin. I'll go ahead and ask this of all of you, but Jade, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, can you tell us a little bit about Tulalip's Children's Advocacy Center, how it got started, but also how it's evolved over time?
Yes, hello everybody. first, I just want to say I'm on day 7 of COVID, so I have a very funny voice, and you might hear me coughing or sneezing. um, so our advocacy center started because we kind of had a makeshift children's advocacy center a very long time ago. But then it was dismantled because staff had left. And so it was never able to flourish. And then we had someone who was coming up through the ranks in leadership within the tribe. And she was very, very focused and passionate about wanting a children's advocacy center. And she was able to kind of be the driving force behind getting something started. And the department that she had worked for had someone who also had a passion for having a CAC. And so they wrote up a resolution for the Tulalip Board of Directors. And they went and sat in front of the board of directors and had explained, what a children's advocacy center is and how it could benefit our tribe and different things like that. And the board of directors signed a resolution in 2009 for the official Tulalip Children's Advocacy Center to get started. We were then funded after that from the tribe, but the bulk of funding to really help our CAC to flourish came from a DOJ grant in 2009. And so that's when it was, because the tribe had just given a little bit of funding to be able to be a department, have a couple people in it, but it wasn't able to really expand yet until we got the DOJ grant. And then that leader was able to really get the foundation started and get our MDT started. And once I joined the CAC, my role was as a tribal member to start to become the leader of the CAC. And in that, something that was a dream of my predecessor was to have us become accredited. That was something she really, really wanted, but it's just really hard. It's a hard road to become accredited. And so it wasn't necessarily something she was ever able to really devote time up to. And so once I started, she was like, hey, would you be interested in kind of leading that? And I said, of course, anything to help improve the services out on my reservation, I would be more than willing to want to lead. And so we were able to, from our state chapter, we were able to get some funding to get a consultant to work with me on building our accreditation. And thankfully, the leader before me knew exactly what she was doing, and she had built our policies and procedures. And so us becoming accredited was a pretty swift process. And, it's a lot of work. But it could be a lot harder. And she had really set it up to where we were very close to accreditation. And there was just things that I needed to twerk or change to get us there. And so that's kind of the beginning story for our CAC. And then now what we do is we have a forensic interviewer on site. We have trauma therapists on site. We have our advocates on site. So the only thing we don't provide on site is our medical, but we do have an MOU with our sexual assault center that's close to us. And so we're able to utilize them for any medical needs. And then we also have our multidisciplinary team, which was mentioned by Laura earlier. And that meeting happens every other week on site and over Zoom at the CAC. And it has many different partners who are frontline with all of our victims of crime. So that's kind of it about my CAC.
Thanks, Jade. We always love hearing the evolution stories, right? Where did this idea begin, right? To bring this to the community, and what were those first steps? There's always bumps along the way, right? And then those stories of perseverance that really come out of that, I think, are great. So thank you, Jade. Megan from Alaska Cares, would you mind kind of talking a little bit about your CAC, how it got started, maybe how it's evolved?
Sure. So Alaska Cares got started in the late 90s, and it is a Providence clinic. And they reached out to South Central Foundation in 2012 to see about starting the Alaska Native unit here. So about 18% of Anchorage identifies as Alaska Native or American Indian, but about 48% of the children seen at Alaska Cares are Alaska Native or American Indian. So they saw this need and reached out to South Central Foundation. We originally started with 2 advocates on site that provided services. And in the last couple of years, South Central Foundation has just really invested in this program. And we are up to 5 full-time advocates and forensic interviewers, my role as a manager. And then we also have a behavioral health consultant on site that does crisis intervention with families and provides short-term services after the evaluation. So it's been a huge growth in recent years, but really due to Providence seeing this need, seeing that the Alaska Native folks are overrepresented here and doing everything they can to find this partnership. So we work really closely together here at CARES.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I think one of the things we hear over and over again is that it's a lot of collaborative work to be able to meet the needs that are being identified by the field, for sure. Thanks, Megan. Carol, could you talk a little bit about your CAC in Salt River and how it got started and where you're at now?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, so our Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community is located in Arizona, and we sit right in the middle of a very high urban population. We border Scottsdale, Arizona, Mesa, Arizona, and Fountain Hills. And our Family Advocacy Center, so we're on Pipash and O'odham land, the Salt River. I always like to give a little bit of background of Salt River. Salt River is 2 tribes in one. And so it's the Pipash, which are the Maricopa, and the O'odham, which are the river people. And so our advocacy center started approximately 10 years ago. And like many advocate centers, we started because of a horrific crime that occurred in the community. We are blessed in the sense that we had a lot of services in the community: social services, behavioral health services, police, our own police department, tribal prosecutors, had all of these different departments that were operating and doing a good job. And then there was this major incident that occurred in the community where we lost 2 community children. And that really kind of sparked a fire in our community. It sparked a fire with council, the delegates, community members, employees, and we wanted to really know the whys. What was happening? We were seeing these crimes occur. We had all of these services at our hands, but it just continued to grow and get worse. And so they started a project where we hired some outside consultants to come into the community and really look at with a non-biased lens of, here's your community, this is a snapshot of what is happening. And one of the takeaways that we learned from that was not that people were not doing their job. Everybody was doing a phenomenal job. We weren't communication. Communication was not happening in collaboration. And so through working with this agency, we learned that one of the biggest things that could be established is a family advocacy center. We learned that was the hub for collaboration and coordination of care for children who have been victimized. So we knew of a CAC, and Salt River wanted to expand it more to really cover families. And so we started to look at the high rates of domestic violence, as well as aggravated domestic violence, and even elder abuse. And so through the duration of the 10 years, we hit some major milestones. So initially when it was established, it was really just a hub for communication for prosecution, the detectives, and our CPS team. We had a lot of missing pieces at that point that were not at the table. We didn't have mental health representative. legal services. There are a lot of entities that really contribute to the coordination of care for children and making sure they're successful as they're going through the duration of the system and healing. And so the first milestone was like just hitting the establishment. We need to communicate better, stop operating in silos, and really work as a team, as a holistic team in the community. And so that was the birthing of our advocacy center. And then, we went through a few directors, and each director, contributed to where we're at today. It really laid that foundation thick for us. And so when I've been at the Advocacy Center as the director for 3 years, and then I was the behavioral health representative for 5 years at the table. So in the last 5 years, we also obtained a grant from OVC, and we were able to establish the services within our FAC, which is huge because even though we have great services and there was that coordination, it really limited the stops the clients and families had to make. It was a one-stop shop. And we know in working with victim, survivors, that I don't want to tell my story to the person over and over and over again because we lose them. And then, they have a window of tolerance that they're able to operate in. So I think the biggest milestone that we kind of really hit it hard was getting those services with an FAC. And so that's kind of where we're at. We've been accredited as members through the NAC for quite some time, for at least 8 years. 8 years out of the 10, I believe, and really working towards accreditation. We have 2 licensed trauma therapists on the team, and then we have 2 full-time advocates, and then we have another position that we'll be posting soon for another advocate. So we'll have 3. So it's growing, it's very exciting, and that's kind of how we were established at Salt River. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, I think, when I was talking to Kimmy preparing for this presentation, she was like, oh, I know Salt River. We've been down there. Such a unique program that I think a lot of tribes look to for how you all have done it. And one of the things I really think is unique about yours is that you title it, it's a family advocacy center. And I think that's such a beautiful piece to the program you have there.
Absolutely. And Laura, just to kind of piggyback on that too, I mean, Carol mentioned the collaboration. I mean, that is key. And we had the opportunity to tour it and see your beautiful meeting room that's just huge and can accommodate everyone. We could see your visitation room, and there were members from your different agencies or programs that you collaborate there that were there to greet us and talk about what it looks like a day in the life for you guys. And I think that's key to remember throughout your CACs is the collaboration is key. You have to have that because at the end of the day, we're serving families and we need to be able to have that communication with everybody on board to make sure that we can provide them with the best services. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's see, Bobby, we still need to hear from you. And I know in some of our conversations earlier, as we got ready for this, we talked about South Central's system of care that really kind of emphasizes the support for the whole person, that like holistic approach for the person, but also the family. And I'm just wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your program and that model of care that you all utilize.
Sure, thank you. So Megan and I work for South Central Foundation, same company, and our corporation it's a system of care. We operate under the tribal authority of Cook Inlet region, and we serve 65,000 Alaska Native American Indian. You'll hear us use the word customer owner. We own and operate our own healthcare system. And so the kind of unique thing we have is that system of care is like 80 programs, right? So I'm one, Megan's one, but we have everything from pediatricians, optometry, medical behavioral health. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my one program. And there's so many resources that we are able to tap into, but our history went back to the 80s. And we asked our customer owners, what do you want us to focus on? And all of their voices came back and they said domestic violence, child sexual abuse, and child neglect. And this isn't something we're proud of, obviously, but we are not only overrepresented, like you heard Megan share, but we lead the nation in violence and rape and murder. And so it's a huge problem. So our customer owners didn't surprise us that this is what they wanted to focus on. So we searched the nation. This is back in the early 90s now. Actually, we searched internationally for what can we do that's going to make a difference for families. And so we formed Family Wellness Warriors. It was formed in 1999, and it focuses on using the strengths and the values of Alaska Native American Indian culture to restore families. We have a Dena'ina name. Our Dena'ina name is Nuiju, and it means to return to our true selves. And it's just that belief that whether you're the person that caused harm or the person who has been harmed, that there can be a return to your true self if we tap into our history, our culture. And so we work in everything from the prisons with court ordered. We focus on the family, so we're the wraparound services, right, for the adults. So we work in the Department of Corrections in 3 different prisons. We work with OCS, that's our Office of Children's Services, with our first responders, that's our police, our state troopers. In the villages, we call them village police safety officers. And that's a unique component because those they're working in small communities as a first responder, serving their own families, their own communities, people they're related to. So we're working with a wraparound of all of those individuals, and it's a process that no matter if it's an intensive training in the prison or in the community, in the village with the tribe, that we're using peer leaders, we're using story, we're using an opportunity for a safe place to share. A lot of times, a person, whether you call them someone being harmed or causing harm, is where you interrupt the cycle, right? We know about ACEs. And so we've been doing this for over 20 years. It's a process where they learn healthy relationship skills, where they can share a story, because at least in Alaska, being overrepresented, including in prison, our Alaska Native American Indian people, they're going to return home. And a lot of times their family's waiting for them to return home. Well, we want them to be healthy. And so that's the investing in the family unit. And we work a lot with tribes, and I can talk about our model hopefully a little bit later. But one of the interesting things that we did that I do want to say, because we have that system of care, we were able to do a study that was a propensity matched study that looked at healthcare utilization. If you're using this, the world would call it a pro-social intervention, right? We use Alaska Native American Indian culture is our foundation, but using that intervention, how it affected healthcare utilization and looking at their ACE score. And doing this study, this research, we found those that attended this process, 55% reduction in emergency department visits. And these are the customer owners that use the healthcare system the most, those that kind of cycle. And then a 79% reduction of substance use visits. And so just a safe place for them to be heard, to learn healthy relationship skills, to return to their true selves. And so that's kind of where Family Wellness Warriors was birthed, so that the families that represent the children that Megan works with, we're working with, and working on them being healthy.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think one of the things we're going to have you talk about in a little bit is kind of how you take that model and model it for tribal communities who are wanting to implement it. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Thank you. So I think, let's see, let's go back to Jade and Carol. And in your introductions, you both kind of described some of the services that you all provide through your CAC. If you wanted to expand on those, please do. But when I'm thinking about that support you're talking about being available, it has me thinking about collaboration, right? To meet the unique needs of each kid, each family that you're supporting. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you all provide in-house, and then what services you offer through collaboration with other programs, agencies, or providers. And maybe, Carol, if you wanted to start us off, what services you offer in-house and those which you collaborate for outside.
Sure. So in-house, so again, like I said, it's a one-stop shop. So when a victim comes through or we receive a referral, we do something, I think it's unique in the sense that we do it's an internal staffing, what we call an internal staffing. So it's a little bit different than an MDT. We still do our MDT monthly, but we do a collaborative MDT staffing. And so one of the biggest plug lines I say is that often it's, how do you get your prosecutor at the table all the time? How do you get your mental health provider at the table all the time, especially in Indian country? We have these questions. It's really not a choice. And I say that very gently in the sense that it has been, like Jade shared, the tribal council has said, we are 100,000% behind what you're doing. And I think that's key. So that buy-in piece comes from leadership, and then it comes from the bottom. So all the in-between of services that we're providing to community members, we know we're supported like a sandwich. We know that they're not going to fall because we got the support of leadership and then our workers at the bottom. So when we do that scan, so all of our victims, receive a very thorough staffing that includes the assigned detective, it includes the assigned CPS worker, it includes a mental health therapist, a trauma therapist, and a victim advocate. At the time of that staffing, they're not technically assigned to any of our services. Because of confidentiality and things like that, we have to ensure that we're following those bylaws. Once their case comes through and they have this, it's an open investigation, we will assign it a victim advocate and a trauma therapist. So when they come through our facility, they're being greeted by their assigned victim advocate and their trauma therapist. They can always opt out of services. They could say, I don't want to participate. That is very rare. We don't really see that. We do see that sometimes with our domestic violence ladies, and then, they need time for things to settle in, the shock, and then usually within 24 hours, they're picking up that phone and calling their advocate. So our advocacy services is very extensive. They do, it's really a lot of hand holding. I will say the number one thing for us to be successful at our center, and I always tell our employees this, is relationships. It's just that old school, how you roll in Indian country. So COVID has definitely been challenging in that sense because of the virtual piece to that. It's not kind of how things are done in Indian country. So that's kind of put a really hard twist on how we're doing things. So I'm getting off track here. So number one, victim advocacy services. They do orders of protection. They attend court. They work with the assigned detective at the, again, hand in hand with the discretion of the client. They help them with emergency housing. We also help with long-term housing. So one of the things that we often see is our grants allow us to do this. First month's rent, last month's rent. One of the things is we know with our victims, the financial piece of getting them established is very difficult at times. So we can put them in a hotel, we can put them in short time, but then what? Then they end up going back to couch surfing, and then they sometimes often end up back with their perpetrator. So we really try to do that long-term planning with them when they're ready. We've been really successful with that. We've had a lot of our victims get in long-term housing with their children. So they do a lot of that. Groceries. What I say is we try to mitigate and remove all barriers that could prevent them from coming in and getting the help they need and their healing. Bottom line. So what is it that, why can't you get here? Okay, well, how can I help you remove that? And sometimes it's just that they're just not in that stage of change yet, and so I tell our advocates, well, you're open hands when they're ready to rock and roll, you be right there with them. And so we have that services. And then in addition to that, we have our trauma therapists. So they're all, my senior therapist is independently licensed LCSW. She has she's EMDR trained, level 1 and level 2, and she's also a certified TFCBT therapist. So she has a lot of credentials. And our newest one is a community member who just received her MSW. We're very proud of her. And so we're going to train her up in all of these other modalities. So they provide in person or at home individual sessions, as well as family sessions. Many times, especially our sexual abuse victims, what you'll see is, there's a lot of shame that happens within the family. How did I not see this? Well, that's uncle, or that's my brother. How could he do that to my children? So there's a lot of that we try to support them in, and by doing family sessions. And then they have our CPS worker team is within our family advocacy center, as well as the assigned detectives. So they know what we try to do with that is, because there's so much taboo around that. Like, that's a CPS worker, they're going to take my children. So we really try to remove that barrier and say, we work here as a team. And we've started to see a shift in that, where families, when there's a lot of safety risks or things like that, they can see that, okay, they're at the advocacy center. They're working for me rather than against me. And then we have legal services that we work with. They have like the GALs assigned, and they also have a civil team. So if there's again, another barrier could be like, well, he owns the house and now I'm kicked out of the house, but we're married. Legal services, boom, let the advocate will hook them up with legal services, and then they'll start to work with them. And then lastly, but very important, is our detectives. They are handling and hearing firsthand what some of these crimes against children are. So they work very closely with the families. All of our detectives, including our lieutenant and our sergeant, are trained in trauma. They'll kill me when I say that, because they're like, here she goes again with trauma-informed principles. Okay, Carol, is this, but it's so critical in how we handle these cases. And so they do good. They attend the trainings, and they're learning, and it's good. I think everybody there has an open mind and teachable. And I think that's what's really key, is always growing and adapting to the change in Indian country. Because I think as we get closer and closer, right, because we're closing this gap with trauma, that's what we're really trying to accomplish, is like, how can we break the cycle? And so we're constantly always trying to have that in our mind. It's like, the trauma is still happening, but what we can do to help break it? And so when we have providers that are trained and teachable in that area, it just makes the collaboration, coordination for the families and the children we serve better and stronger. I think I answered everything.
Yes, thank you,
Thanks.
Carol. Like the word I can think of is like robust, man, that the amount of support you're able to offer. And then just hearing you talk about how you all structure it in a way that supports the connection and relationships amongst the provider team, and how that then, parallel process style translates into the relationships providers have with the kids, with the families, with the adults that they're providing services to, I think is pretty incredible. You said you didn't want to get or that you were getting off track, and I love getting off track, so I'm going to follow it for just a second. But you talked about, COVID having this significant impact on how I'm assuming how providers connect with the folks that they're providing service to, but also the connection you all have as that professional team supporting kids, families, the community at large. And I guess I'll put this out to all panelists because I didn't warn you that this question might be coming, but I'm just wondering if you guys have any kind of unique strategies that you all have been using to try to circumvent some of the lack of relationship and connection that has been created as a result of COVID and some of the guidelines around social distancing and whatnot to protect folks. So any thoughts or ideas on like creative ways you guys have worked to maintain relationships, build relationships, nurture them in the face of these COVID challenges?
Hi, Laura. Yeah, I can give a little of what we've been doing. So something that we've done with our partners from an MDT stance is we will drop off little things at their offices, just thanking them for their continued support on the team, baking them things or just dropping off little gifts. I also make sure to check in with them individually. Either by phone or text, just, whatever they like, email. I'll check in with them individually, make sure things are going okay. Due to our accreditation, we have to send out surveys every 6 months just to make sure how they're feeling on the team. So I get feedback on those too. And then with our clients, because when COVID first happened, we weren't able to have in-person therapy with our kiddos anymore. And that happened for months. And so something that we did was with grant funding, we put together care kits and a little booklet that matched it. And it talked about the book and the items that were in the care kit were different therapy techniques that kids could use at home to help regulate themselves and things that they're learning in therapy. So they were doing Zoom therapy, and then we would drop off these kits at their door. So then while they're in therapy, they'll have their little booklet, and then the therapist can also go over the booklet with them to kind of teach them the different techniques of what they could use that's in their care kit. So that's just a couple ideas of what we've done at Tulalip.
Those are excellent, Dave. Thank
I
you.
can speak about here in Anchorage at CARES. So one of the things I think that when COVID first hit, right, everyone is kind of locked in their offices, doors are closed, nobody is seeing anyone face to face. One of the things we've implemented is we're co-located with all of our agency partners. So we have Child Protective Services in the building, as well as a few units of law enforcement, medical providers, kind of everyone, mental health. And we draw names out of a hat and we write their name on a board. And it's like a big Post-it note. And people walk by and write nice things about this person. And then we just go and deliver it on their door. And we change the names every week. I think one of the things Carol talked about was the importance of relationships, not relationships with customer owners, but also within the team members, right? COVID was hard on so many people. And it was just something to bring a little joy to the building without gathering. I think also as time has gone on, I've encouraged less email communication and like, let's go talk safely face to face and have some person to person interaction. So that has, you can hear more laughter in the building because people are finally at least around each other a little bit more.
Yes, it has been for the different waves we've gone through. I think throughout the pandemic, you just see like the hope get lifted every time people are able to like get together as, in a safe way and laugh with each other and connect, Thank you. Well, hey, Jade, I just wanted to come back and ask that same question we asked Carol, but just different strategies you use to support collaboration between providers that you work with out of house, so to speak, services that you have to contract out for to meet kind of the holistic or to have that holistic approach with the kids and families that you're supporting. Any strategies you use for that collaboration?
Yeah, so Well, I think with COVID, I just mentioned some of the things that we do utilize. Most of our services are able to be provided in-house. The only ones that I had mentioned before that were out of house basically are our medical exams. Um, and what we do is we just have we have really good relationships with all of our partners that sit on our MDT. And one of the partners that sits on our MDT is our SANE nurses, our sexual assault nurse examiners, is they sit on our team at MDT. And so we are able to be in communication with them all the time. And then a lot of the times when the detectives need to work with them, our hub is able to kind of be that middle person for detectives, so they don't have to do so much communication back and forth. So yeah, just to touch on the services again that at our center that are provided is our forensic interviews, the trauma counseling, and then our advocates. And then we also do trainings within the community. We do trainings with professionals. And then we've also helped different places like our health clinic develop responses to when they have, people that come in and they've had some sort of trauma happen to them. We've actually helped them create their protocols down there because we do have our own health clinic on the reservation. And then the actual people who sit on our MDT is our Tulalip Police Department, our detectives, and sometimes the commander will come. The FBI, Badacha, which is our children's CPS. We have our own CPS on our reservation. And then state CPS, which is Child Protective Services. They also sit on our team. Tribal prosecutors, the U.S. State District Attorney's Office, they sit on our MDT. And then the Snohomish County Sheriff sometimes will sit on our MDT depending on the cases. And then our SANE nurses, they sit on our team. And then of course the advocates. We have an advocate, our forensic interviewer, our therapist, they all sit on our MDT too. And that MDT meets every other week. And then our building is also located in a very good spot on our reservation. So it's easy for people who live on and off the reservation to get to us. And one of my big things is always security and safety. We've actually built a safety zone for our location, which is the law in Tulalip. We've built it into our code, and our code is our law on the reservation. And so there's certain people with certain backgrounds who are not allowed on the property. Doesn't mean we can't help service them. Like if they were an offender and then they have children who have needs, we would be able to see them off site, but they would not be able to come on our property. And so we have a screened in fence area, double badge access. Just to even get in the front waiting area, you have to have badge access to get in. We have separate waiting rooms. And then we also have a back access that we can do. Like if we need to do a forensic interviewer on a kiddo who's under the age of 11, who could possibly be a perpetrator too, we could let them in through the back of the building. So then they're not coming in through the main part of the building. And what I have found is one of our biggest collaborations is with our police department. So they're not housed in-house, they're housed out, but we work super close with them, and their building is actually very close to ours. But that relationship is one that it's a lot. That is a relationship that I'm consistently working on and building, because almost every single case that we're working with the police, because at our CAC, our services are centered on children who are victims of crime at our CAC. And so basically, if the police are involved, we're involved. There are those cases though where we have children who don't want the police involved, and depending on many different situations, sometimes the detectives just say, we're going to listen to the child in this. And then if in the future they're ready, then we can look at it again. So some cases they're not necessarily involved in, but most all they are. So that is a relationship that I am consistently, holding and just really being supportive of things that they need.
Thank you, Jade, and thank you, Carol, and thank you, everybody, for jumping in on that question about COVID. And I'm going to turn it over to Kimmy here, and she's got a few questions for y'all as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go back to Jade and Carol for a little bit. Sorry, you don't get a break yet. Just one partnership that we've talked about as essential is working with tribal leadership. You both mentioned your program would not be successful without the support of tribal leadership. I'm a firm believer in attitude reflects leadership too. It has to come from the top down. Some of our participants are new awardees and are just in the beginning their journey. They're just beginning their journey. Could you tell us more about how you and your program engage with tribal leadership to gain and maintain their support for your program? Jade, please go first, and then we'll do Carol.
Sure. So in tribal communities, as most of us know, a huge piece of anything that we do needs to have leadership buy-in. And sometimes what I've experienced is with different leaders is sometimes they feel like accreditation or trying to get ideas from outside could mean that we are trying to go away from our culture, that we're trying to not provide the best culturally appropriate services for our communities. And so that is something that as a leader of an accredited center, I'm constantly battling. You know, there's turnover with leadership. And so what I have found is that when we have new leaders, they don't understand the model, they don't understand the importance. And so my job is to be able to tell them the importance and to show it to them and to let them know how I'm able to incorporate our culture into what we do. And so there's always main points that I make with new leadership to, you know, just keep to justify basically why we have an accredited center and why we need to keep it accredited. But you can also use these points as you're a building center, because I do feel like even if you're a building center, hopefully the goal will be to become accredited. And that's because of the standards from the accreditation. So the first one is that because we're accredited, you know, we're able to have professional roles that are specific to the children who are victims of crime. And the standards are based on best practices and research. And there are ways of being able to incorporate that into our cultural needs. And, you know, we also go through reaccreditation right now. My center is going through reaccreditation. We're actually turning in our reaccreditation application this month. But the reason that we have that requirement is so we are making sure that we are still continuing to work at the best practices to serve to our people. And this is also accountability. We have accountability because we are accredited. We can't just think we know what is going to be best. We work what is best because of that accountability. And we still get to, like I said, we still get to personalize our centers, make them culturally appropriate. Some of the things at my center that we do to incorporate culture is we have spiritual work done on our buildings. We have medicine men and women come in and do spiritual work on our buildings to make sure that they are spiritually fit for our people. We incorporate our traditions such as beading, weaving, sewing with our clients. With grants and stuff, we've been able to buy sewing machines and beads and all the different things that we're able, you know, we do ribbon skirts. We have clients who come in and want to teach their therapists our culture. And so we've had clients come in who teach our therapists weaving. And so we're able to purchase all the items for that. So our therapists can learn, you know. We also, so one of the big pieces is therapy. And one of the things that I do with our therapists is I have them go through Dr. Bigfoot's culturally appropriate trauma-focused CBT. And so that brings that aspect to the therapy that's happening with our children. And then second, our accreditation provides targeted, stable, quality trained employees of mine for our community because we are accredited. So my advocates have to have a specific standard. My therapists have to have a specific standard. Basically, anyone that works for me is going to be very good at what they do because they're continuing their training, because that's a requirement of our accreditation. Also, being accredited allows for flexible funding. Once you become accredited, you have more pockets of funding that you can dip into, which lessens the burden of the tribe, because then we're able to get more grants and different things like that because of the funding. And then also with our accreditation, one of our focuses is burnout and making sure that we're trying to support our team as a whole from our MDT stance. And so as the facilitator of our MDT, it's my job to be making sure that I'm checking on those people. And by doing that, it helps prevent burnout. It helps to keep them motivated and focused. And so then we're also offering the best professional services that we can to one of our most vulnerable populations on our reservation. And why would we not want to support that? And so those are just kind of the points that I touch on with new leadership as they come in, of the importance of our CAC and our accreditation.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I think we'll talk a little bit about retention later. But one thing I just wanted to note too was it's been my experience, working within tribal programs across the country for many years. You hear about the some of the programs that they're implementing on their reservations or within their nations. And you hear those outside of tribal nations, and they say, oh my gosh, that's just amazing. That's so cutting edge. Where did you come up with that at? And we're like, this is within us. This is what we've practiced since time immemorial. We're not cutting edge. We're going back. We're going back to what has helped our families for generations. And it's just it's always so awe-inspiring to hear how some of the tribes and the nations across the country are doing some amazing things within their programs. And just, the outsiders that are like, oh my gosh, I never even would have imagined that. I never would have dreamed that. And we're like, yeah, it's what we do. It's how we communicate. It's how we work alongside our communities. This is all we know. This is how we've always done it our entire lives. So thank you for sharing that, Jade.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
That I forgot for us to be more culturally appropriate too, is that any of my employees who are not Tulalip, and even my employees who are Tulalip Native, what I always ask of them is to join our cultural events.
Oh,
So
yes.
we have our own museum on our reservation. So I always send them for a day to our museum. Just go explore our history. That teaches you our history, where we come from as a people. And then to continue that, I want you to also go to our cultural events where people are allowed. So our salmon ceremony, our powwows, different things like that. And I always tell them, if you feel uncomfortable, that is okay. Let me know and I will go with you. And people are so accepting in our community because it's like they want the people who are providing services to our children to know our community. And that's one of the ways that I really try and foster that in person for them, because you can't teach someone your culture. They have to experience it.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, we have to have those stakeholders, and even as community members, we have to recognize, hey, they're showing up. Like this might be an all right kind of guy, or even more so than just the traditional gatherings that we have. It's the basketball games or the volleyball games or the softball games, right? You see them in the stands and they're like, yeah, they're going to be, we're going to respect the fact that they show up for us, and maybe it'll help, maybe lower some boundaries or some walls that we may have with a provider that's not from within our community. Yeah, that's a great point. Carol, what would you like to add?
That's hard to follow, Jade. That's awesome work. I love it. That's why I need to come out there and see your place. This COVID needs to settle down so it's ruining my travel plans. So at Salt River, it's interesting because we have our departments, our other partners are very involved in initiative that started probably, I want to say, gosh, when I was over at behavioral health. So that was at least 4 years ago, we started a trauma-informed initiative. So that was around the time where trauma-informed became like a big buzzword in the country overall. People started to, the ACEs, people started looking at the ACEs more. And there was a lot of studies being done on the impacts of trauma. And at behavioral health, it was actually HHS that started this, Health and Human Services that started this initiative. And why I'm telling you this story is it helped really build the foundation and the relationship with leadership that actually benefited the Family Advocacy Center. One of the things that we started to see was a pattern. Our clients kept coming in, and it was like almost like a revolving door. Same issue, same trauma, kind of repeat. We were, providing all of these modalities that weren't working, and we started to look at, well, what are we missing? Maybe we're missing something. As we started to talk and survey and talk with community members, we weren't really asking the right questions. It's like, what's happened to you? We weren't asking that question. Like, what happened to you? What is this trauma? So as we started to look at this more and more, we realized that we weren't assessing properly with the clients that were coming through for services and asking instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you? We were not asking the right questions. And so we started to change our approach in our assessment tools that we were utilizing, our intake tools, just our complete approach. I think we went out to Alaska I went out there. It was so cool. The systems of care, it blew me away. And I think I went, Bobby, to see the Warriors program. I mean, I was just, we need to bring this back to Salt River. I was all excited about it. And that really, you guys really helped really jazz us up and really made us look at least our leadership of, we are definitely missing something here because our numbers are still high. People are still dying. We are missing something. So we started this trauma initiative, and what we started to do was we started to educate the community about trauma, because I think in Indian country, we're survivors. There's so much resiliency, but we don't know the why. And I think when we understand what has happened, it creates opportunities of healing. And so I think what we did was we had a conversation initially with Tribal Council. Tribal Council invited us out and we did a presentation. We even partnered with Dr. Zimmerman and the Casey Foundation. All these other entities were assisting us in providing safe opportunities for the community to learn about what trauma is and how we can heal from it. And so that started. And then in between all of that, we did some trauma trainings to the leadership. So leadership started to understand, the trauma and what's really happening in their backyard, and that they have these programs can help, foster the healing process for them. And so from that, we started the trauma initiative, and then we also had started a community. It's called a community health summit, and these were done quarterly. There's a group of folks that put on these summits, and they're focused on leadership. And so it's an opportunity for leadership to gather and really break down. The last one that we did in person before COVID, we invited one of our tribal council to tell her story. And so it really was humbling in the sense that you have a leadership up here who is just like her neighbor. She went through something. She's a survivor, and look how resilient she is. So it was an opportunity for others to hear that I hear you, and I'm willing to listen to you, and I'm willing to support your program. And here is my survivor story. So we started to really kind of unpack that for the community. And as we did that, tribal council became more educated and more aware. And once that happened, boom, stakeholders. It was like, boom, I'm a stakeholder. Here's my flag, and I'm going to stick it in my yard, and I'm going to support your program. Because what we know is it's like that, the internalized depression piece, right? Like we start to bicker at each other, and once that happens, it makes it very difficult to establish these programs and really help the people. And so that was kind of our approach. We did a initiative. It's still going on. We still have, we're doing a trauma organizational study, looking at the departments. We say that we're trauma informed, but what we're learning is we're really not. We're missing a lot. And I think a lot of tribal communities, well, I attended this training and, I've made these modifications, but it's an ongoing process. And we're learning that at Salt River. And so that this trauma initiative we started with was really like having safe conversations and training. I don't like to really call it trainings because it was really like talking circles. We had these huge talking circles with the community members. And so many people came forward and was willing to tell their stories. And so that they wanted healing, they wanted help, they were yearning for it. And so once we created that safe place for it, all of the programs that followed, it was like, boom, boom, boom. We had that tribal council support. So there was no tiff about it. And what we're seeing is there's policy revision happening. We talk about this all the time. And I always say, it's that our program should not be unique in Salt River. It shouldn't be like, oh my goodness, behavioral health is so awesome when you go there. That experience should be when you walk into HR, when you walk in and you walk into Public Works and need a new trash can, when you go down the street and you got a flat tire and you're working with, fleet, or if you go to the computer lab and you're working with IT, that experience should be completely through your entire process for all of the community members we serve. It shouldn't be uniquely different to trauma. And that's the shift. That's a shift in Salt River that we're really making. And we've targeted departments that work collaboratively. So we've targeted FAC, we've targeted social services, PD, our police department, and our health and human services. Because what we know is we're serving very similar clientele. And if I have that experience at Family Advocacy Center, you best believe it. When I walk you across the street over behavioral health, you should have that same experience. We shouldn't be unique in that sense. And so that's that shift that we're making. And it's really exciting. It's a lot of work, and there's still the rubs and the tiffs that happen. But it's really just taking the time and really unpacking it for folks, because everybody has a story. Whether in Indian country, there's everybody has a story. And I'll tell you what, in my own journey, I learned something new about my mom every day in her journey of healing. And so if my mom is, in her 60s and I'm in my 40s, I can imagine community members that don't even have these dialogues at home. So if we can create that safe place and hold that space for community members to do that, why not? And so that's kind of how we've, what's going on, what's cracking at Salt River.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. Oh my goodness. I just love that. Why not? Why not? Why shouldn't we be the safe place to have that dialogue, and everybody should have a safe place to be able to talk about what their trauma looks like for them, if they feel like they can. Thank you for that. And we're going to move on to Megan and Bobby. You guys aren't tribally operated, but work closely with the tribal communities who access the CAC services. Could you talk a bit about how the program and the tribes work together and different strategies you use to partner with each other? Megan, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we are not tribally operated here. However, we work closely with our MDT partners. So here in Alaska, we call CPS OCS. And in our OCS office, they also have their ICWA folks in the building. So we work really closely with the ICWA representatives here. And then I know Bobby has a lot more experience working with the tribes.
Uh-oh, we lost you. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'll let Bobby take over
Oh.
talking about her experience with talking with the tribes. Sorry.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was wondering if you might be able to tell us about the work happening within those Alaskan villages to replicate the model of care. That's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so we do have a tribal authority. It's Cook Inlet region that we operate under, but just a little bit about Alaska real quick. So we literally are divided in the state into what we call regions. So we have 13 regions. And in case you didn't know this, we call all of you the lower 48. You are the 13th region. So 12 regions within the state. And then the 13th region is lower 48. So any Alaska Native American Indian customer owner that lives in the lower 48 is our 13th region. So we have 229 tribes, federally recognized tribes. Each one is unique and different in our protocol. So we are the CIRI, C-I-R-I, Cook Inlet region. And that's where we operate. So that's our land. That's Denina land. But we don't go into another region without tribal invitation. You don't go into someone else's land without the invitation. So we are tribally driven. It's very, very important for us to return to our true selves, to tap into culture, that the tribe's at the table and leading. So once we get that invitation from tribal leader to tribal leader is the invitation written, then we have an implementation model. The average is about 3 years that we work with a tribe. And so we're constantly working. Right now we're in the Nana region, which if you look at villages, that would be Kotzebue would be the hub. We have hub villages and then surrounding villages. So we're constantly in Alaska working with our villages. And then we're in multiple different states. And so the model basically, which Canada did it in 2 years, Ontario, Canada. But like I said, the average is 3 years. North Carolina's on their 4th year. That's fine. It's whatever the tribe needs. But the first year is basically coming up, attending our trainings, looking at our curriculum, which was written by Alaska Native American Indian people. There are the intensives that are a week long, and then there are the daily learning circles and open to the community. You don't register, you walk in, right? It's whenever you need it. And it's a list of about 30 different topics, right? So whether it's recovery support, generational healing, survivors of suicide, men's drumming, cultural, there are services where you can walk in every day, and then there's the training intensives and then the prison work. And so just depending on what the tribe wants, once the request comes in, they're going to attend and see what we do. They're going to get the behind the scenes protocols, process, curriculum. They're going to get the training, the trainers. So for a year, this, what we call a community-based steering committee, and the tribe helps us choose who are those stakeholders. Those stakeholders are going through our trainings, a full year. Then year 2, we are now boots on the ground in your land. And we're leading it with that community-based steering committee being shadows, if you will, learning, experiencing, kind of co-participating. And the participants coming to the work that we're hosting in your land, they're additional stakeholders who the CBSC identified. So you're going to say, here's 50 more people. They're going to be core to our work. And so now we're doing community awareness workshops. We're letting the community know. We're doing a readiness survey. How ready are they for whatever topic you chose? Maybe it's domestic violence. Maybe it's reentry from prison. So whatever category you chose, we're finding out, is the community ready? And so year 2, we're boots on the ground in your land. And then year 3, we return again to your land, only now we're your support system, you're leading it. That CBSC, those 50 stakeholders, and by the way, the tribe is and that committee, you're the leaders, we're the support. So you're telling us, how does it need adapted? It's having your culture infused into it. It's doing it your way. We're not the experts in your community, you are, but we're going to give you this curriculum, and communities rename them. It becomes yours. It's not like and so year 3, we're supporting. So right now we're in North Carolina. They chose Cherokee, North Carolina. They chose the intensive that they wanted. We're in Montana, Rocky Boy, and they chose the learning circle daily model that they wanted. And then we're in North Dakota, and they chose that they wanted to replicate the prison work. And so, each one chooses something different, but it becomes, it's a beautiful combination of relationship with the tribe and the community. And it is that safe place. It is peer led. This is not clinical. This is not hierarchical. This is, I came out of domestic violence. I was a single mom for 12 years. I learned to give my kids a voice. I have 18 grandbabies now that all of my kids, all of my son-in-laws have went through this process to end that cycle, right? So I was determined, I need to end this. I don't want my grandbabies growing up in this. And so I went through it. My children and their spouses went through it. And now my grandbabies, they're 1 to 14. My 14-year-old is like 5'9", taller than me. And they're growing up safe. And so it's really just, what does a safe place look like? It's returning to our true selves. It's using our culture. And it is, yes, intervention, but it's more than that. It's prevention, because now my grandbabies, they're not going through it. And we're ending it in this generation. So yeah, so it's just a beautiful process of using tribes and community together to replicate.
Wow. Gosh, Bobby, that just leaves me almost speechless. That's amazing. It's about breaking that cycle. Absolutely. And gosh, I thought an hour and a half. Oh yeah, this can be a lot of time. No, I think we need about 3 hours for this panel. This has been some amazing conversation, you guys. I just want to sit and hear more. But before we begin to wrap up, I just wanted to ask each of you, what's been the most rewarding aspect of your role? What keeps you coming back day after day? And I'll give you guys each about a minute, and then I'll kick it over to Laura. Thank you, guys. Megan, do you want to go first? And if you want to point to someone else, sorry.
Yeah, no, totally fine. The most rewarding thing is, I like to tell families that are going through our process here that I am going to walk alongside this journey for you, right? I am not going to make it easier in any sense of the way, but I will do my best to support you and walk with you as you go, whether it's through CPS, whether it's through the legal system. And my role is to walk through that with you. I love coming to work every single day. I could not have found a better job. I adore coming to a building where I know everyone here is working for the best interest of kids. We're working in a team environment. We are all focused on what's best for kids, and that I get to come to work, share my culture, talk about my culture, and work with my people. So let's see, Bobby, do you want to go next?
Sure. You heard a little bit, right? So I can't say that my grandbabies aren't my favorite part of. I got into this work 22 years ago, coming out of domestic violence, and I committed my life partly because what it did for me, and that I found a voice and that I didn't return. But I think my favorite is watching any family go through that. And I'm not naive. My daughters, we have 3 foster babies right now. They've adopted 2 so far. I know that not every child gets to go back to their biological family. Sometimes they get a new family, right? So I'm aware of that. But when a family gets restored, when one of the parents was in jail and they get healthy And those children are waiting for that parent to come back, and they pop in and they visit, and they're a family unit, and they're restored and they're staying strong year after year. And I get to see them again. Yeah, that's what keeps me coming back. I will tag Carol.
Thanks, Bobby. Same. I think it's. I always call it. I did most of my work, my career before Advocacy Center in addiction, and I think, and that's what got me really into wanting more and contributing to helping specifically Native women heal. And my own story, my own journey is that I always call it like that magical moment. And we don't know when it's going to happen, but when that flower, I see it like a flower, it just goes poof, and it blossoms. And people are like, how do you do this work? And it's like that. When you see that happen, when people tell me that there's not hope, and I see that every day, there's testimony of that healing. I'm like, nope, I'm getting up today. Thank you, Creator, for this day. I'm going to suit up and I'm going to show up. And you know what? If that client comes back a million times, well, guess what? I'll be there a million times to greet them and hold that space for them. So that definitely is why I have chose this line of work. And I will tag Jade.
Thank you. So I do the work that I do because, as most of us know, on reservations, this type of thing can get ugly with families and tearing people apart. And a lot of the times that's why we have victims who don't come forward, because the perpetration is happening from their family members. And so for me, it's about being a voice for our children who don't necessarily have a voice because of who has victimized them. And it's also for them to know that I believe you. I am someone that believes you, and I will stand here no matter who your perpetrator is. I have been in court when my own family is the perpetrator and I'm standing with that child. To me, I'm very black and white. There's, once you go to that side, there's no turning back. And I will always be someone who will be a voice and be someone who supports our children and what they're going through. And I just want them to know that if you can't say it, I can. And I will be there for you, and I will represent you in the best way I can if that's something that you want. And I do believe you.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you so much for taking the time to just for those last closing words. I almost want to say, we're done, everyone. That was beautiful to hear that. And thank you for all that you've contributed to this conversation today, all of you. I did want to do a couple minutes for question and answers from folks. So if people have additional questions for the team of panelists, go ahead and use the chat box. But we did get one along the way. And this is from Rachel, and she is prevention manager at a non-tribal CAC. And her question is, could anyone touch on prevention services if your CAC offers them? That prevention piece specifically. And I'll just leave it to y'all to chime in if you do.
Hi, we do at our CAC. So we call prevention work outreach and education, not prevention work. And so what we do is we do a lot of training and education topics in the community. We'll send out surveys. What are people wanting to learn about? We'll create our own PowerPoints to go in the community. We'll do Zoom meetings. We meet with people one-on-one. We go to the schools. I'm the one who teaches the mandated reporter training to all of the professionals in the tribe, because part of our code, which is the law, is that anybody, volunteer, worker, whatever, that you are a mandated reporter when you come to work for the tribe. And so I teach that. I have a brochure with all of our different trainings, and I can't think off the top of my head what those are, but one big one that we do is darkness to light. It's evidence-based, and it's prevention of sexual abuse with children, but the tools that they teach you could be used for all different types of abuse with children, adults. And that's really about the prevention work, obviously, but also bringing it back to adults. We as adults, it is up to us to help protect our children. It is not up to our children to protect themselves. And so that's something that I really love about that training specifically. And so that's one that we give that is evidence-based. And then, like I said, there's many others. So for us, for our education and outreach, that's kind of the basis of what we do. Is it's literally all trainings and talking to people individually about different topics that they have or questions. That's just kind of our main basis part for education with our community.
Thanks, Jade. And then I see Bobby put in the chat that they do awareness months throughout the year with different webinars for the community, and it's always featuring different agencies and experts.
Yeah, to jump on to
Go
Bobby.
ahead, Dave.
Sorry, Carol. To jump onto Bobby's note real quick, we do have our own Facebook page. And so we do our awareness months too all the time. And that's one of the ways that we'll promote different things too within the community is our Facebook page.
One of the things that we started was the Start by Believing campaign recently. During COVID, we've seen through our Family Advocacy Center, like almost 100% uptick in sexual assault cases within the community. And so the council was curious on, was that contributing to COVID? What were the reasons for that? And so we started a work group. And in the work group, there were community members and then some leadership. And we started the Start by Believing campaign. But basically, it's a campaign where the message is that it starts with you. It starts with the individual. So it's about an individual holding space and believing you, kind of like what Jade said. I will be that voice. If I don't believe, I'll be the voice that will believe you if you can't. And so that campaign we kicked that off in 2020, and we had our first drive-through event, and we had over 150 participants, which is pretty big turnout for a drive-through event. But it was an opportunity for us to provide education, preventative resources to community members about body safety. How do I have that conversation with my child about good touch, bad touch, or what does that even mean anymore? So there's a lot of, I think, research around, do we use those words, good touch, bad touch, and so we partnered with different individuals in the community. There is a preventative team at Salt River. It's through HHS, and they do specifically prevention work. But in collaboration with the other departments, we started this initiative. So we very similar to what Jade and Bobby shared.
Thank you all. We had one final question come in, and we'll have this be the last one because I know we're at time here. But let's see, who was it? Erica asked about how you ensure confidentiality within your communities, considering that most are quite small, and noticing that this comes up with some of the families that they serve. You want to speak to the confidentiality piece?
I can start.
Oh, go ahead.
This comes up quite a bit through our facility as well. We do have community members. My entire team is 50-50. 50 of us are from other tribal communities, and the rest are community members. We have policies and procedures in place for this. Number one, I think that's, within our Family Advocacy Center, there's policies and procedures in place that around confidentiality, and then within the discipline in which they're operating in. So for an example, if they're operating under the role of an advocate, there's certain bylaws around confidentiality with their victims that they serve. In addition, if you're a therapist working with the client, there's even more strict HIPAA and because it's health records, confidentiality bylaws that apply as well. So that number one, that's our first line of barrier that we have. But in addition to our staffings, our MDTs and things like that, when this comes up, there's a little like script that I will make note of and say that if there's any conflict, ethical issues, please excuse yourself. We've had individuals on the line that excuse themselves. We've also had some slip throughs where for some reason they didn't see that it was a conflict, and through supervision, we've had conversations about confidentiality. That is, I think, always an issue in tribal communities, because either because of relations, they are related many times. They're first cousins, second cousins, there's some type of relation, especially at Salt River. I've noticed they're not clans, but they're, they have, it's kind of like more through their names, their last names of relations, and certain families are related and some other families aren't related. So, and then we have a lot of intertribal marriages through Salt River. So then there's that piece to it. But I think number one, I mean, basic. So like policy procedures, everybody signs a confidentiality agreement. Even though we're virtual, I make that statement. We're still operating under confidentiality bylaws. What's said in here stays in here. If you're not involved in the case, then you shouldn't be involved, kind of thing. And then number three is supervision, having rock solid. I mean, I think that's where a lot of my training came from, was having really good supervision. I have an amazing supervisor that if something wonky goes off like this, I'm able to process like, hey, I have this confidentiality issue coming up. How can I help my employee be successful, as well as, talking about the clientele. The other thing I like to use a lot too is like, do you want to be the only bird on the olive branch? I always say that to folks. So if that olive branch breaks, that might be a weird analogy, but it works for us. And I say, you're out there by yourself. That's never a good situation to be in. So it's always important, if you're not sure, to run that by me. So I think transparency is huge when it comes to tribal confidentiality. Would be transparent with your people. I would say, I get it. I'm from a nation myself. I understand it. How can we protect you as the employee? And then how can we protect you as for this family? What does that look like? And then just having those dialogues. I think that would be a good start. My recommendation.
Hear the principles of trauma-informed approaches in every words that you put out there, Carol. Thank you. All righty. I think I'll go ahead and wrap us up here. I want to be mindful of folks' time this morning. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much to the panelists. You guys have done extraordinary work throughout your communities. Kids and families that have been impacted by what you do is just immeasurable. So thank you first for that. Thank you also for the time you put into preparing for this presentation today, and your time this morning and now afternoon. I'm so grateful for being able to be part of this and hearing from you and the stories that you have to share. I thank you for my own learning, and I thank you for the folks out there who attended today, that I'm certain walked away with something. I did also want to say thank you to our attendees who were here. And just remind folks that we're going to have this webinar, the recorded webinar, available to watch on the Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center, which is nativecac.org. And if you visit that website, you'll see some other resources that we've been beginning to develop that really is to support the work of tribal children's advocacy centers, but also CACs who are wanting to better support and provide services to American Indian and Alaska Native children and their families. There's also a button that you can request TTA. So we'll do our best to come around and provide support. And if we can't, through our collaboration with our partners, we'll find a way. And then following this presentation, we're going to send you all an email thanking you for your participation. And it's also going to include contact information for our panelists today and our Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center. And of course, we'll provide you a link to a survey about this presentation, and your feedback really just helps us create good quality content that's responding to the needs that are out there right now. I wanted to say a special thank you to our grantees who are here with us today and to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention who made this webinar possible. And then as we move into a new year, y'all, we just wish you well, and we resolve to work beside you as you support the health, the well-being and healing of Indigenous children and families throughout Indian country. So with that, I'll just simply say thank you and be well.
Are we supposed to get off now too?
Yeah, I will wrap up with an email, but thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Kimmy, I'm just leaving it a minute in case anybody puts anything in the chat so I can capture it in the meeting thing, but I think we're good to hop off. I just want to make sure there's no final questions or chats that I can capture and
You don't
respond
need
to.
me. I'll
All
jump
right.
off, grab a bite before my next one starts.
Right. See you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.